Right.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be advised that the open session of this council meeting will be recorded and streamed live on council's website. This recording will also be archived and made available on council's website. Whilst all care will be taken to maintain the privacy of the public gallery, members of the public may be recorded. Council requests that all members of the public are respectful and use appropriate language.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. Are there any apologies? Running late. We'd like to move that thank you, Councillor Garrard, seconded Councillor Rami. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. Declarations of interest.
Mr Mayor, I understand my declaration of interest from the last meeting carries over to this meeting as the items, and so does Mr McNulty.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. Are there any other declarations? No others? Thank you. I have a notice from Councillor Elmore of a possible matter of urgency. Councillor Elmore.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to put this as a matter of urgency. In my previous role at Parliamentary Council, petitions were part of the agenda, and I found out tonight that if you want to submit a petition or table a petition in Cumberland Council in the meeting practice, that you need to put it on the business paper. But this petition is quite urgent. A person in Blackshaw Street contacted me a little while ago about removing bus stops from Blackshaw Street. And as you know, Blackshaw Street is a very busy road, and there's a lot of traffic in Blackshaw Street. And the M91 runs from Parramatta to Bankstown, and we had some discussions here previously about the connections between Parramatta and Bankstown. But this particular bus stop is only near Eve Street, and it's outside some seniors units. And the proposal is to remove the bus stop. And this person contacted me and I said, I don't think it'll ever happen because it's got to go to the traffic committee. But when I seen this actual brochure that come from Transport New South Wales, it actually proposes to remove two bus stops in Blackshaw Street. So I'll read the petition out if you like. It reads, "We are shocked and dismayed by your proposal to remove two bus stops at 34 and 35 shown in the street plan circulated to the public. These two halts, one opposite housing complex of 319 and 323, and the other opposite East Street. These two halts were put there to use after tenants numbering 31 moved into occupation more than 6 years ago. Almost all the tenants are over 70 years old, the majority over 80 years of age, and have severe mobility problems. Therefore, these two halts have helped immensely over the past 6 years. Other elderly people in and around Blackshaw Street and East Street use these halts for travel. Therefore, the removal of these two halts will certainly cause immense hardship to a vulnerable section of the community. We appeal to you to reconsider your proposal in the light of the above facts and allow the usage of the existing bus halts." Can I refer that to the Traffic Committee for their attention?
I'll accept that as a matter of urgency. Is there a second for that? I've got Councillor Garrard. Is there any discussion? No discussion. Then I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Certainly, Councillor Elmore, if you give it to the appropriate officer. Oh, would you? Certainly, Councillor Rami. I think if you raise it with me after the meeting or with Council, I'm going to bring the public forums forward. We have two speakers tonight. We have a speaker on 205/17 Wentworthville Leagues Club with the proposed licence. Could Bruce Simpson please come forward? Please take a seat, Bruce. You'll have 3 minutes to address council, and if you could please stay there if there's any questions, if you just press the mic.
I'm a resident of Pendle Hill, just up the hill from Wentworthville Leagues Club. It's an amazing and wonderful community facility that's been created by the community, and it's something that we're all very proud of. What I'm seeking or wanting to alert you to tonight, from the community perspective, the proposed lease for 21 years and the sort of valuation, it's hard to understand whether that's a good deal for council or a good deal for the club, you know, and how fair and equitable and appropriate that is. So what I'd ask is if something could be added to the report recommendation or the resolution in item 1 that be placed on exhibition, the proposal to enter into a new licence, if that's the way council decides, but to include, in addition to the intention to enter, include related background information, including the proposed licence terms, like the details of it, and the background information like the valuation, if appropriate, legal opinion or redactions of it, and so on, so that it can be understood. Because the replacement, it's a significant area of land. If that needed to be replaced in some way, the properties there, it's $1,500 a square metre. You're looking at almost $40 million worth of land. It's the largest and most significant open space. Councils and the community's done wonderful things with the whole area, the open space, the Bond site. The open space being created there is an example of what has and can be achieved. I think the community in general is happy for the Leagues Club to stay there and continue, but it appears that the only real justification for it being more than a normal 5-year renewal is to enable the club to depreciate the improvements it's made to the property. And there are other ways of making that work financially and so on, rather than necessarily not locking it up for 21 years. Alternatively, the information may show it's appropriate to do that, but to enable more informed submissions, it would be good for the community to have the kind of information that I assume is available to the councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Are there any questions of Mr. Simpson? No questions? Thank you. Our next speaker is for item 211-17, the Cumberland Quarter First Performance Report. Mr. Ray Horder, could you please come to the bench?
And it all sounds very good tonight, by the way, very clear. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councillors. Look, I'd just like to speak, if I may, on this particular matter, if I just may read out so we know what we're talking about briefly. Management of council sports grounds have been fully transitioned from Section 355 operation to council operations. I've been involved with 355s and have had a lot of concerns, but I'd just like to firstly point out, and I'll explain why, I think that needs clarification. I don't believe that statement is true. The lighting in the grounds, 3.5 weeks after Cumberland took responsibility for them and they were going to handle that lighting, all that was passed back to the users, back to us, with an indication in that information originally that would be in place for the winter season as well. So council has passed that back after 3.5 weeks, I should say. Also, with respect to the grounds, we are presently in the cricket season. And I might add on both of these, up to a week before the cricket was starting, I was told, Ray, we will be handling the allocation of the grounds. I'd like to inform you that that has not happened. Parramatta District Cricket Association, very large association, we have hired those grounds from the council. We have allocated them to the teams, and we are collecting the money from the clubs and passing the money back to you. Council is playing no part in respect to that. I just want it clear, and the reason I'm saying that I remember last meeting that it was agreed that the council will come back to you good people, I think it might be next Wednesday, correct me if I'm wrong, with a report on 355 for you people to consider. I use those two examples, and I don't mean to be unfair to anybody, but I don't believe that there'll be too many people sitting around the table here tonight, and that's only in fairness because a lot of you have never had 355s as an example, that would understand clearly what was involved in 355s, all the work that was done by those 355s, as an example. I know the council, we are putting on extra staff, and I've had the opportunity to speak to some of those in recent days. I've got no doubts that we do have a plan where we want to go, and we've got this extra staff. I've actually met them on the ground at Ted Burge, where I've been for 61 years when it went with the Waratahs. So I'm sure we're trying, but again, I know by conversations that a lot of people don't understand what the people done on those 355s. Some of the things, one or two of them very disturbing, that happened when the administrator was here, and I'll be as quick as I can. When we attended a meeting at Merrylands, we all thought, well, we're going to find out a lot here. We were advised a little ways into the meetings there'll be no questions asked. We couldn't ask any questions. And the main point I'd like to make from that meeting is that they put out 3 modules, and the people of 80-odd people in that room had to vote which of these modules would best suit them. I quickly had a look and I decided none of them. So I spoke to the person who was running the meeting. 2 minutes later, called across another person who was also assisting running the meeting, and they both said, Ray, you're 100% right.
Mr. Horder, your time has elapsed, and I'll give you some grace. Could you wrap it up very shortly, please?
I'll wrap it up by saying, thank you very much. Thank you, councillors. Wrap it up by saying the reason I just wanted to quickly take this opportunity is to raise the fact that I would hate to see us go down the same track as before, and I'm not a very smart bloke, I might add, but if this meeting's taking place next Wednesday, I would like to think that everybody understands the workings of 355. By that I don't mean you insinuate there were some money problems, which proved it wasn't correct, but the fact of what actually was done by people over 30, 40 and 50 years that were just thrown aside like a dirty rag, and we have a situation where we're still learning. Can I finish with a 10-second? And I don't mean to be rude, you've given me some time. I understand we have rules, Mr. Mayor, councillors, but this matter was handled by an administrator for 18 months. I told him the night that he made his decision that it was handled very badly, not rudely. He said, well, Ray, you've got to prove me wrong. I've had 3 minutes, very quickly, to try to get a little bit of information through to you people that was handled for 18 months by an administrator. Since he's gone, it's been handled by lots and lots of people here. And a person from the public, again, I stress, I'm not a very smart young man, but I've got 3 minutes. You don't make it very easy. I hope in that little 3 minutes you've given me, I've tried to convey a message. But if you want the public involved, and I keep seeing it all the time in publications, let's get the public involved, let's get the help. 3 minutes for 2 years is a little bit hard. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Horder. I believe we do have a workshop for the councillors to go through the runnings of the 355 committees next Wednesday, and then that will be referred back to a future council meeting. So no permanent decision will be made next Wednesday. It's purely for the councillors to go through the tradition of the original running of the 355 committees, plus licences and leases and other maybe possible arrangements, and then that'll give the councillors more of a background. Are there any questions of Mr. Porter?
Yes, that's right. I don't have any questions of Mr. Horder, but would like to point out to him and to anyone in the gallery that although there's a time limit at the council meeting of 3 minutes, people are very welcome to contact councillors or write to them if they choose. We're always open and available to anyone who wants to speak to us. So we look forward to hear further information that Mr. Horder wants to share with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horder. Thank you. Council, I note that there are a number of confidential reports, a report attachment. If that's the council's wish, then normally the mayoral minute is, but I'm more than happy if you wish. Well, if with respect to the mayoral minute and also the item 183/1, I believe there might be more than that, so I would ask if councillors could identify those items that they wish to discuss in closed council. Obviously, it'll be item 204 is, and I'll run through them to make it easy for council if they'd like to indicate. 183, that wish to be discussed in close. 192, no. 205, in close, councillor.
Yeah. Given Mr. Simpson's submission, I think we will need to refer to the confidential attachments, so that will need to go.
205, yeah. Certainly. I doubt whether 206 is required. 207, grants. 197, waste services. 208, Parramatta catchment, no. 209, tender for Auburn baseball centre, no. 210, tender evaluation for the Oriole Park, yes. 211, the quarterly review, no. And then we have 2 notices of motion, no and no. Well, in that case, council, I'll run through it again. So the ones that are proposed for closed committee council is item 204, 183, 192, 205, 197 and 210. Yeah, there does, and there will have to be the according statement to be read, either because it is concerning a staff member, or it is commercial in confidence, or natures of that type. Council, if council's agree, I have a motion for that those matters be put back fast. Move, Councillor Addy. Councillor Campbell. No. Councillor Zeta.
In relation to the mayoral minute, there are 2 parts, Part A and Part B. It seems to me there's nothing in Part B of a confidential nature, and therefore it should be dealt with in I
do not wish to preempt the decision of council, but if council is so inclined with that, I intend to read that out in open council if it is successful.
Yeah, I don't know what the view of the rest of the chamber is, but that may help that discussion.
That is my intention, and then if it's a successful motion, then it'll be on public record in its entirety.
We will split it, won't we? Part A in confidential session, Part B in open session.
Well, I think against the other, so I've got to run with the order that it's written.
Well,
Case council isn't inclined to support the mayoral minute.
well, I don't think there's anything in Part B which is of a confidential nature.
I think, Councillor Campbell, if you look at the words that are written in that, it might indicate something.
There are three words there, Mr. Mayor. There are three words there which should be replaced with the word council, and you know what those three words are.
Yeah, I think there might be a way to skin that cat, and I might just have a whisper in Councillor Campbell's ear as the meeting progresses, because well, I can't do it in open council, but my preference would be for what I suspect you're talking about, Councillor Campbell, and I think there's a way to achieve that through the regular processes.
I have a motion that those items that have been listed be put back to the back of the meeting. It was moved by Councillor Addy, seconded by Councillor Zeta. Is all in favour? Against? Declare it carried. Council, are there any matters, items by exception that do not need to be discussed? And that would leave 206, 207, 208, 209, 211, and obviously the speakers for the motions. I'll run 206, which is the motion for the Local Government New South Wales Annual Conference. 207 is the Cumberland Council Community Grants Program Round 1. 208 is the Parramatta River Catchment Group. Well, we'll have to discuss that one because it needs a nomination. 209 is the Tender Evaluation Report for Auburn Baseball Centre. It should be basketball. Yep, it is. Sorry, my mistake. The next one's the basketball. And 211 is the Cumberland Quarter 1 Performance Report.
I think if nobody wants to speak, we'll be able to get through them fairly quickly.
Okay. Council, I'll go to the first one then.
Did you get that? I called it 211.
You called 211?
You noticed me.
No, we'll run through it then in order, make it easier. Okay, Council, we'll move to item 206/17. Oh, sorry, 192/17. Which is the contract for provision of information technology services between Technology One and Council. The report was deferred. Moved Councillor Elmore, seconded Councillor Lake. Is there any discussion? No discussion. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. Yep. Council 206/17 motion for the Local Government New South Wales Annual Conference.
Just wanted to make a comment on that one, Mr. Mayor. Perhaps ask if the author could give us some clarification. I don't know where the motion originated from, but regardless of the policy behind the motion, I'm struggling to understand it, particularly the last phrase that starts "or are recommended for refusal by council staff." The reason I'm struggling with it is I just don't think it makes sense. You can't delegate decision-making power on a conditional basis. You can't say to the staff, here's a DA, you can consider it, and if you're minded to approve it, you can approve it, but if you're minded to refuse it, it's got to come back to council. My understanding is that if you're going to delegate, you have to delegate the complete discretion, and then it's a matter for the staff whether to approve or refuse. Now, it might be a bit slow on the uptake. It might be just the way the motion is worded, but it would just be helpful if it could be outlined a little bit. Thanks.
Councillor Lake, I believe that the motion hasn't been accepted in its current form of LG New South Wales. I believe that they have received several motions of a similar type, and they are putting what they believe would be a suitable motion for the conference. So virtually, if council endorses this, or they're endorsing that they accept that LG New South Wales will be putting up a suitably worded motion with a similar bent.
No, I guess I just wanted to understand it.
Well, unfortunately, the councillor who requested it isn't here, so so I do have a motion, Councillor Addy. Withdraw, certainly. Is there a second for that? Second, Councillor Campbell. Is there any discussion? No discussion, I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. Council, 7, Cumberland Council Community Grants Program, round 1. Move Councillor Elmo, move Councillor Wong. Is there any discussion? Councillor Garrard?
Yes.
Seconded.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I wisely took people's advice last meeting to see an organisation in Granville get trampled on the last 2 weeks. So I'm going to move an amendment that the Granville Historical Society, their funding be approved in this resolution. There's money, as I understand, that hasn't been spent. I'm doing so because I'm not of the opinion that there was adequate consultation in terms of how these grants operated with the community at the time they put their application in. I'd be doing it for anyone. Quite frankly, I think in good faith they've put their application in. The staff have probably misrepresented is probably a strong term, but in their reasons for knocking the application probably haven't been accurate. And in saying that, the workshop we had recently was about moving forward. I think we get these ones off the plate and hope that the world comes up a bit brighter after we reconsider just how this grants system is going to work in the future rounds.
Councillor Garrard, would your amendment also include the ones that have that are proposed to be approved as well?
Yes, it'd be number 4. And if I could second that.
So I take it, Councillor Grove, you're adding.
There was no need for an amendment. There'd be an addendum that it would be received by the mover.
I'll ask.
Otherwise, I'll have to get June Bullivan to.
No, I'll ask. Councillor Grove is the seconder, but there might be no need for an amendment. Councillor Elmore, would you be willing to accept that in your motion?
We went through this last council meeting, if I recall correctly, and we did workshop this grants program, and we did find out that I know she's watching me. I know this person very, very well, but from what I can gather, the Granville Historical Society application would probably comply with round 3, I think it was. And round 2 is just finished as far as I'm aware. So round 3 is opening soon. if Granville Historical Society like to put the application through in round 3, I'd certainly, if their application complies and is recommended by the panel, I'd certainly support it. But at this moment, I'd just like to get this. Grants program, those $660,000 to put out in the community. At the moment, we're stalling. That money is better in the community's hands rather than us playing. Well, should be careful what I say here, but playing around with how this money should be spent. So I'm sorry, Councillor Garrett, I can't accept your amendment.
Mr Mayor, I'll speak against the motion then.
We've only entitled to one speech.
That was for the amendment.
Yes, it was.
So now I'm against the motion.
Okay, well, Yep, you are correct. Yeah. Well, but maybe we should give the mover of the original motion the opportunity to speak first. And then you can reply. Councillor Elmore?
Always giving you a fair go, Glenn.
If we go through the proper process, and there's always a concern that we're overstepping the mark on this proper process. The grants policy is in place. It's gone through the panel. The panel has recommended this grant these attachment for these grants be allocated now. So I think we should sit back and wait to see what happens in round 2 and round 3 and round 4. And when these recommendations come through, I think that we should consider those applications then.
Thank you, Councillor Elmore. Councillor Garrett.
Mr Mayor, the Granville Historical Society are being scourged here because their community representative, myself, was too vigilant because I read the paper before it came up to council. Because nobody else picked it up at the last meeting and only I did, because I slaved through all the grants. I believe that there's enough concern and issue here associated with why their application is being knocked back by the council officers. The council officers effectively said that the Granville Historical Society, whose application was to do a history of the Scottish migration to the Granville area, didn't fit into the, wasn't appropriate. Well, of course it's appropriate. If you want to do a study, what do historical societies do? They do studies. Now, we've gone through all of this before at the workshop, that we don't believe that there's been adequate consultation, meaningful consultation with the community to explain exactly what each round of these applications were about and how would they submit their application. I've seen many studies done by the Granville Historical Society over the years, and they always end their research with an event. And the event is the launch of what their study is, whether it's a new book or whether it's a study into migrants of Scottish on this occasion, or just the makeup of the area, the Indigenous population of the area. They have been very, very much associated with that over the last, how long they've been around for? 25 years? Now, and I've spoken and I've launched any number of those events. And in fact, they are an event. And of course, when you look at the rounds that are before us tonight, there is a category there for events. And if there had been a better consultation about this and better explanation to the society about how they would address their objectives of this scheme, the grant scheme, well then I'm certain they might have put that in to explain to you, councillors, in a bit more detail just how they would finish off this research of this prized investigation into the Scottish migration into this area. So by virtue of all of that, I think there's enough concern, and certainly I think we need to give some direction, and I think there's enough doubt in the eyes of the process that perhaps they should be given a Guernsey in this respect, because at the last meeting I know there were people who voted for the amendment to send it back to a workshop, but they believed that it would be getting a Guernsey tonight. And Councillor Sarkis was one of those who said, listen, we'll just listen to what everyone's got to say, and at this particular council meeting, we'll get the ball rolling. So from that perspective, that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you, Councillor Garrard. Councillor Gamble.
Mr. From what Councillor Garrard had to say, I think I'm speaking in favour of the motion and against the amendment, just to make that clear. But I think that, as far as I can tell, the application was very deserving, and the Granville Heritage Society did send some additional material through to councillors by email, and I read that, and I looked at their presentation, and I was deeply impressed with it, and I've had a conversation with the woman from the Heritage Society, and I'm quite convinced that it would be a very good cause for council to support. But the reason I'm supporting the recommendation as is I strongly support due process, and I think that we need to have objective criteria. We need to have that followed by our professional staff, with a minimum of influence from councillors who are supporting any particular group within the community. In this particular case, I think it would be rather upsetting if they're not successful, but by not making it in round one, they're not cut out of the process. I understand that they would fit the criteria for round three better than they do for round one. And so I would like to give that a go. And if they were to go through the processes that the staff say are the appropriate processes and they don't get anywhere, then I might be inclined to move Councillor Garrard's way on it. But I've got confidence that the best way to approach these kinds of things is to have objective fixed criteria applied in an objective manner by our professional staff. And if we're not happy with the criteria, then we should look at the criteria and think about changing that, again, on the advice of the staff who have expertise in this area. But I think if Councillor Garrard's amendment gets up, I wouldn't be worried about what it's doing in this case so much as setting a precedent for every councillor to come in and say, well, they wouldn't say it this way, but what they would mean is the incentive would be there for councillors to feel that they ought to respond to particular groups in the community for one reason or another. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Further speakers? No further speakers? Okay. Well, I have an amendment moved Councillor Garrard, seconded Councillor Grove, as written. Waiting for it to go back down. I think it was an item 4, wasn't it? Yeah. So it is the recommendation with an item 4 that the funding for Granville Historical Society be approved, and I have a motion moved Councillor Elmore, seconded Councillor Wong, that the resolution, just the 1, 2 and 3. So I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? Against? On the voices, I declare the amendment lost. We do have the technology, so I'll call for a vote. I declare the amendment lost. I will now put the motion, and again, councillors, seeing we're getting a handle with the technology, let's do it a vote again.
Mr. Mayor, that took 10 times longer than it would have been if we put our arms up. God gave us arms so we could vote at council meetings. Everyone knows that. It's unnatural. This is brilliant technology for the disabled, but we.
It's the first time, Councillor Campbell. But, all right, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? No. I declare that carried on the voices. I declare it carried. /17, the Parramatta River Catchment Group, and we need a councillor of the nomination and an alternate. We have a Councillor Elmore.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, alternate. If one councillor is unavailable, then the other councillor can fill in. So I have a move for Councillor Elmore. Moved himself and seconded Councillor Lake. Is there someone who would like to volunteer as an alternate? Councillor Grove as an alternate. Can I have a second for Councillor Grove? Councillor Wong. Is there any discussion? No discussion, then I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried.
Here we go. Do I have to wait for somebody to turn this on?
Yeah,
I see.
Okay.
So I've got to wave first. Is that?
No. Your name will come up. Just don't get jumpy.
Okay.
Okay. I'll be the one getting jumpy.
Yes, sir. I've just got a question about the Parramatta River Catchment Group terms of reference. They talk about on page 4. There's a little model, and they talk about an executive committee. I was just wondering if we have officers on that committee. And if so, who are they?
Thank you, Mr. Govers.
Councillors, through you, Mr. Mayor, currently the staff member sitting on the executive committee comes out of the Parks and Recreation Group, our natural area.
host organisation is?
I believe the host organisation for the whole Parramatta catchment group is Parramatta City Council, or City of Parramatta Council, excuse me.
Okay, and I assume they have minutes of their meetings?
Yes.
Is it possible for the councillors or interested councillors to have those circulated?
I'll make contact and
Great.
ensure we circulate those.
Thanks. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lake. Any more questions? No more questions? Thank you, Mr Govers. Council item 209/17, the tender evaluation report for Auburn Basketball Centre roof remediation project. No, it wasn't asked for. The one on Oriel Park was, but not this one. I believe the indication was that you seem to be comfortable with the tendering process. Moved Councillor Elmore, seconded Councillor Garrard. Is there any discussion? Sorry, I didn't look. Councillor Zeta.
Through you, Mr Mayor, just to the relevant council officer, I'd like a confirmation of the actual name of the winning tender, the actual entity that won the winning tender. Confirmation what the name was.
Mr McNulty.
Mr Mayor, through you, the report reports that the tender is P&D Bamford Proprietary Limited Trading as Ladoran Group. That's
Now,
as much information as I have.
now P&D Bamford Pty Ltd, is that the name on the tender document that was used to apply for this particular contract?
I haven't seen the tender document. I can't answer that.
Is there an officer here who has actually seen the document? Because that's not the company. That company doesn't exist. The actual name of the company is P&D Bamford Enterprises Pty Ltd.
I don't know.
So if you do a ASIC search for the name Ladoran Group, the name that pops up on the ASIC records is P&D Bamford Enterprises Pty Ltd and not P&D Bamford Pty Ltd. So if the applicant has applied under that particular name, I don't know whether the actual tender application will be valid or whether there's an error in this particular report. So until we confirm that, I don't think we can actually vote on this particular report.
I will ask the mover and the seconder to relinquish, and I'll ask for the item to be withdrawn.
ABN number on the tender? Is the ABN with?
Actual ABN. So the ABN shows that the entity name is P&D Bamford Enterprises Pty Ltd. There's no ABN on the actual document that we just had a look at, but there is the trading name. So the trading name is Ladoran Group. So when you do a search on that, what pops up is P&D Bamford Enterprises Pty Ltd, not P&D Bamford Pty Ltd.
To solve this confusion, next time can these companies create their ABN number, because it doesn't really matter what they're called. Their ABN number is really is how they're registered. So
I'm sure after this example, Councillor Elmore, that the officers will take that on notice. If the officers can clarify before the end of the meeting, otherwise the...
Yeah, can we hold it over?
Yes, yeah.
The additional, I suppose my additional comment is, this particular company, I believe, is a trustee of a trust and doesn't trade in its own right. I'm not sure whether that's been put forward in the tender documents, and whether the name of the actual trust needs to be put on there, whether the actual trustee company, which I believe this might be. It's all going to be subject to the confirmation. Okay.
It'd be my intention to list it in the closed council, and if we can get the information when we go into closed council. If not, council can discuss the situation in closed council, and then if it needs to be deferred, it'll be up to the council to defer it. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll move on. Council 211 Cumberland Quarter First Performance Report and Delivery Program.
Mr. Mayor, there were a number of questions that I'd want to ask in relation to this, but basically I feel inclined to move the report with an alteration to it, amendment if you like, that no further action be taken in relation to the review of Council's seniors units, and I'm referring to what is written on page 280. Where it says complete and implement review of Council senior units for independent living, and refers to a request for information in relation to the seniors units. Now, I know what this is all about. When the administrator was here, a decision was made to call for a report that will consider either outsourcing the management of Council seniors units or leasing them for any use, and I stress for any use, or selling them. And I spoke against this on 2 occasions, pointing out that there are 76 units which were provided by the Commonwealth Government on land donated by Auburn Council for basic housing for the most needy senior citizens. And this was done in the 1970s when the Commonwealth Government notified Council that they were prepared to fund seniors units on a 50-50 basis if the Council did. Council donated the land and the Commonwealth donated the construction. And it certainly was not the intention of the Commonwealth at that stage to provide Council with an asset which could be used in whatever way a future Council saw fit. It was done for a specific purpose. So I don't know if any action flowing out of this report might necessarily be legal or not, but we have to look at what is ethical, what was intended by the Commonwealth, and who benefits from it. The administrator, after telling me to sit down on a couple of occasions, said that the matter would be referred to the incoming Council after the election. And on page 280, I guess that's what's being flagged. I think that we need to be very vigilant, lest an important service be tampered with in a way which would result in it either being wiped out or commercialised in one way or another, or downgraded just because of we had to go through a period of administration. And I would certainly oppose any of those possible outcomes that I referred to coming about, and I think there's no point in pursuing this matter any further, so it should be withdrawn.
Councillor Grove, I have Councillor Saha and then Councillor Addy to follow. If Councillor Campbell has completed him, and I have a second as Councillor Christo, so Councillor Saha.
Mr. Mayor, I don't. The subject line is the delivery program. It's, of which this is a very, very small part of that delivery program. I would question just how in order it is, considering notices not being given. There is no urgency to establish, so you couldn't, well, you could, in your judgment, grant it as a matter of urgency. But yeah, we have a responsibility as councillors under the Local Government Act to avail ourselves of all facts before making a decision. That's pretty explicit in the Local Government Act. That's not what we're doing with this report, with this motion. But more importantly, I'm not sure it's relevant to the item on the agenda, and I'd like you to rule on that.
Get the appropriate answer. on where it's fine having the green light. If I could get actually where we are with this review.
Mr. Mayor, this is a fact-finding exercise and a full review to be brought to council. So at this point in time, we've done an internal review looking at the operation and management, and what we're seeking to do at this stage is simply do a request for information from a shortlisted providers who have expertise in this area to look at different options which would be brought to council. I envisage that we would do that via a council briefing before any further paper went up to council on the matter. So it's really for us to undertake a review, understand what the options are that would lay before us.
I believe Mr. Davis would like to contribute. Mr. Davis.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Any resolution that the council made in relation to this wouldn't necessarily change, I'll just remind the council, wouldn't necessarily change the operational plan itself. Certainly council can make a decision not to proceed any further with an action, and that would show up in future reports as a red, and then future operational plans that may not be on there. But I'll just remind council that this is simply a report against the current operational plan, the matter that's before council.
The relevance of the motion to the report line item that we have, and the second part of the point of order, which related to councillors, well, our role as councillors, making ourselves available of all facts before making a decision. I'd like a ruling on those two items.
And I think that's why I asked for more information in your second point of trying to get a handle on where the officers were actually at. I will go back to Councillor Campbell and suggest that if that is the case, then I'm more than happy to have the briefing on this matter when it does come, and then council then obviously will have more information and go from there. So I would concur in that respect that maybe having now had the explanation from the officers, and when, if I could again with the officers, when would you envisage this briefing would take place?
The briefing would take place probably around February or March next year, so early 2018.
I don't know where you're going with this at this stage, Mr. Mayor, but I would indicate that I would have expected that we'd already been out to a request for information, considering the resolution's almost a year old. I remember Councillor Campbell speaking against it at the time. I would, if it does come back to council with some more information, I would want to put some qualifiers on that request for information, because I suspect there is probably some difference of opinion between myself and Councillor Campbell on it, but I suspect it's probably not as disparate as traditional political divides are. For instance, I'm not too keen on the idea of other purposes other than seniors living. I'm not keen on the idea of for-profit providers in this space, and there was a third potential. Certainly against sale in that space too. But well, I think, well, look, there is an opportunity to see what the non-government, not-for-profit sector can provide, and quite frankly, if you think the people who provide the services to our parks user groups and our hall hirers, well equipped to provide people with seniors living, I'd quite happily have that conversation with you every day of the week, right up till polling day.
Okay, continue discussion.
Cumberland Court.
Yeah, no, I will rule that the point of order is successful. I think that I think we need to get the information. So if Councillor Campbell would either like to endorse the recommendation as is or withdraw, and I'll ask for another motion, another mover.
I'm not in the mood to endorse it, Mr Mayor, so.
Councillor Addy is, and seconded Councillor Grove is,
Thank you, Councillor Cumming. I've got some questions about other items. Should we deal with that first?
we may as well, yes. Councillor Lake.
They're only brief, but some of these projects I'm seeing for the first time, so just want a little bit of background. Page 283, there's discussion about a road litter project that is focusing on the Great Western Highway at Wentworthville that involves Wesrock and the EPA and the RMS. Is there anyone tonight who can provide a little bit of background on that? Thank you. I'll keep going, will I?
Could you just identify the item?
Yeah, it's in the key achievements and highlights on page 283. As part of Council's litter abatement initiatives, etc.
Oh,
The second dot point.
second dot point.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
I'll keep going, will I? Page 285, talking about children's services under issues and setbacks. There's a sentence that says some of the centres are at capacity and have extensive waiting lists. I'm wondering if there's someone who can identify which centres they're talking about.
Is there an officer present who could, General Manager?
My understanding, Mr Mayor, is that the centres that are in the western part of council have waiting lists, and the two eastern ones don't have quite as big as waiting lists. Major ones are in the demands in the western area.
So you're talking about Marylands and Pemaway?
Yep.
Yep.
Oh, there's 6 of them. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Page 286, there's under urban planning and development, there's under issues and setbacks, there's a comment that we've got a 20% vacancy within our planning group. We've had a major issue with vacancies in the planning group for a long time. I'm just wondering if there's a strategy to address that, given the enormous amount of work that we're seeing rolling in.
Mr McNulty? Oh, Mr Davis?
Mr Mayor. Yes, we certainly are. So we're recruiting still at the moment. We have been for a while, and we are also using some consultants as well. And you'll see that we've, over the past quarter, the staff that we have been able to maintain at the same level of output with DAs, for example, that basically with what we have had come in, but we do have a backlog. So we are working on that, and we do have a strategy in place. And one of the next things I'll look at doing with some key, more senior positions is actually using a recruitment consultant to go out and basically hunt people down.
Yeah, I imagine the pressure on that group is pretty extraordinary. So.
Immense. Mr General Manager?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The situation is common across Western Sydney. Our ability to compete with private enterprise is limited at the present time, and I would think that we're going to have to offer significantly higher salaries or other incentives to come to work here than we have currently operating, because we just can't attract the staff, because we just can't compete in the market at the present time.
I see. Page 289, we're talking about...
We do have Mr Davis, I believe, who would like to speak on...
Oh,
it's got to be Mr Govers. What item again? Thank you.
283, the road, the litter.
Yeah. Through you, Mr Mayor. My understanding of that project is it's as it indicates, working with the EPA, RMS and Wesrock. The site at the Great Western Highway and Cumberland Road intersection was identified as a litter hotspot through some work done by Council and Wesrock, focusing on road litter. As identified in the dot point, the collaboration meeting was happened in October. It's my understanding that the project itself hasn't actually hit the ground yet. We're expecting that in Q2 or Q3.
And that will be reported to Council, Mr Govers, or at least to the ward councillors?
That'll be part of further highlights through the quarterly reports.
Okay. Yeah, I picked up papers there in one of our Clean Up Australia days. I can confirm it's a really dirty area. Yeah. Yes.
Councillor Lake.
Thank you. Yeah, the little report on page 289, the report back on our swimming pools just tells us the result of the poll. I'm just wondering when we're going to see a report to council on next steps on the swimming pools.
General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The situation with that one is that we had to have a briefing on that, on the pool situation. Hasn't taken place yet. I understand the briefing was postponed because there was not enough time on a previous night. Mr. Knight didn't get a chance to go through the pool briefing. I'm not sure when that's rescheduled, but I'll make sure Ms. Kenyon and clear the matter and gets it back to council as soon as we can.
Yeah, I mean, given the poll was in September, I think our community is expecting. I'm being asked what the situation is, where this is.
The essential question for council to answer is which of the pools do you wish to start the work on, or in what sequence the pools you wish to have them renovated in. And that's a matter that we need to make, council make a decision. The money is allocated in multiple years, but no decision has been made which pool goes first.
So that's going to be the basis of a report to council?
Yes, it will be.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. Yeah, I've got a question about the budget review statements, but I think Mr. Saha can put it more eloquently than me, so I'll let him ask that question. Thank you.
Councillor Saha.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through to you, page number 297. And if I'm reading the budget summary correctly, in the revised budget item, at the end of this financial year, council will make a loss of about $7 million. If I'm reading it correctly, is that right? That would be my first question.
Mr. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This situation shows us a loss because that money has come out of the reserve, which is the waste reserve money. So in actual cash position of council will remain a $2.3 million surplus, but the money, because the money's come out of reserves, for accounting purposes, it shows as a loss.
But then my second question would be, if the money, like you have two extraordinary items, which you have highlighted in row 4, if the money is coming out of the reserve, do you really need to show this in the income statement?
My understanding is yes, you do, and Mr. Sheridan will confirm the odd accounting standards we have to work with shows it as a loss because the money comes from reserve. However, the cash balance is still the same at $2.3 million surplus. Mr. Sheridan, can you explain the reason why?
Under the Local Government Act, there's only two funds. There's a trust fund and there's a consolidated fund. But within that consolidated fund, there's restrictions around waste and general funds. But the way the accounting code reads at the moment, we have to actually disclose everything through the one profit and loss statement. So it's a little bit misleading when obviously you make such a big transaction like we have, that it actually has to come out that way. But that's the way that we have to follow the accounting code.
Okay. So just a comment is that if you can show us in the report about our reserve situation as well, what sort of reserve we have and what, so for example, this financial year we'll be taking out $9.3 million from the reserve. So if you can show us probably 2 more lines under this table here that our reserve currently is this, and then the reserve will be as at 30th of June 2018. I think that will clarify the whole situation here.
Do you want me to point you to page 309? So effectively, halfway down the page, there's a heading called External Reserves Other. And you'll see in there that the opening reserve for the domestic waste levy was $10.5 million. Then it has a negative movement of $5.8 million. Which ends up in an end result at the end of the year of $4.7 million still in the waste reserve. But effectively, if you break down our cash position at the end of the financial year, we've got $118 million projected. $58 million will be in external reserves, $24 million internal reserves, and then $35 million in unrestricted funds. So that shows you the movement down, but we're still in a it still hasn't affected our unrestricted position because those, effectively in accounting standards, they're restricted. So we can't actually, they're not used for general community fund.
I mean, just I want to make a last comment. When I look at the detailed income and expenditure statement, which is on page 305, you have these three extraordinary items listed as well in there. And the way it's presented, I got a bit confused because the $7.5 million, which has been reduced from the rates and annual charges or levies income. May I ask a question? Is that a rebate going back? Is that adjustments like will be put into the ratepayers statement as a rebate? Is that the reason you have taken or put it down the rates?
Yeah, so that was referred to as the waste efficiency payment. So the requirement was that we would actually take that off the instalment number 1, which was due at the end of August. So that's money that the now ratepayers have actually received by making lower rate payments. So it goes back as a reduction in income.
Is it, in summary, is it then fair to say that at the current financial year, if we go as it is, and if we make those extraordinary payments, the council will make a $7.5 million loss, but it won't affect the council from the cash position because it's all coming out of the reserve. And if we see from that perspective, the council will make a profit of 2.3 million. Is that right?
Yeah, I agree with that statement.
Thank you.
I have Councillor Campbell, then Councillor Zeta, then Councillor Wong, and then Councillor Garrard. So Councillor Campbell.
From page 311, where it refers to Auburn Playground Upgrade Project. Could we have some information on what that is? Where is it?
Mr McNulty.
Through you, Mr Mayor, Council receives the funds back from the Lehman Brothers settlement, and one of the decisions the administrator made was to use that money in the former Auburn Council area to upgrade playgrounds, I think to the value of around $800,000.
So that's playgrounds in general rather than one?
Yes, it's over a number of playgrounds, yes.
Good, thank you.
Councillor Zeta.
Just to remember, Council Officer, if we go back to page 305, which is the budget review statement. So just want confirmation, the 7.48 million has already been paid, or is that in the process of being paid?
No, we actually deducted it from the first instalment, so in effect it was basically paid.
It's been paid.
Yeah.
The item that you've got underneath that being the $1.169 million, which I believe relates to, let me see, the waste services transition, I'm assuming?
Yes, there's two, yes, that's right, they're the waste systems transition and VRs from the waste.
That's the $1.169 million. Now, is that coming out of reserves?
That we'll be allowed to take that out of the reserve because it's effectively straight from the waste, transferring them out of waste into a normal employment, so it's a cost
now that,
of the reserves.
Is that, so what's that for, the waste service transition? What's that cost for?
It's fair to classify it as an incentive, I think, for those drivers.
Okay, so these were the additional payments that we paid for the drivers to go elsewhere within council?
Yes.
Okay. And that came out of reserves?
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. And that's already been paid?
Yes, that was paid on the day of transfer.
Okay, so let's go back up to page, where is it? Where are we? Go back up to page 297. There's a comment here that, where was it? Second paragraph on the bottom, the last line, in the event that these extraordinary items do not occur, the financial result would have been a profit of $2.38 million. Is that a correct, they've already occurred. And you can't really say if they do not occur because every single item that relates to the extraordinary items has been paid. So is that still a fair statement?
I guess the intention of this statement was to do a comparison between the original budget and the revised budget. So you're right. What I was trying to say there is that if we hadn't made that decision to outsource the waste, then the operating profit would have been 2.383.
My issue with that statement is that it insinuates that there's a possibility these payments may not occur.
Okay.
But they actually have occurred.
They have occurred. Yes, they have occurred.
So I think that may need to be changed in some fashion to actually show that they have occurred. But if they hadn't occurred, this would have been the result.
Okay.
Because there's no possibility for change.
Yep, I understand your point.
Agree?
I agree.
That's great. Thank you.
Councillor Wong.
Hello. I just have a general question on the balance sheet. So the waste levy that's collected, does that go directly to the reserve fund?
Yeah. So the net movement at the end of the year is basically an offset between the waste that we collect less the cost of delivering the waste.
Yep.
So then the net amount at the end of the reserve, at the end of the year, will then be audited and then put into the reserve.
Again for the next year.
Yeah. So it's a net movement that goes into the reserve.
Can you show me where the numbers are for that?
You won't see it in the quarterly review. You'd see that in the annual financial statements. But I can definitely show you how it works in that process.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you.
Councillor Garrard.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Look, I think this is probably one of the most important matters that comes before council. It's a statutory matter that needs to come before council every quarter, and I really think it's an opportunity for both the chamber to get a handle on what's happening in the city, and also, probably more importantly, it's an opportunity for the community to see how we're performing. And I know it's about the 2 Ps of progress, and it's about performance. And in theory, it's about aligning council's plan with a community vision. And that's where I've sort of got some concerns with what I'm reading. I appreciate the finances of it, and some of the councillors have been able to highlight that the finance team are well on top of what's going on, and I appreciate the interest taken by councillors and their depth of knowledge of the financial issues of council. So it is a financial paper as well, but at the end of the day, it's a performance guideline against council's vision, community vision. And what I see, and I think whoever wrote this report ought to take up a job as writing novels, I think, because there are some wonderful statements in there which I think that
Garrard, a personal reflection isn't warranted in the chamber. Thank you.
Well, no, I'm not suggesting they should go and join the Granville Historical Society or anything like that. But I do suggest that when you walk the streets, I'm not saying I walk the streets at night. I'm not saying that just because
That's why
I reckon only politicians and bandits work at night. But having said that, when you walk the streets and you see some of the problems that are out there, and you've got to say, how are we performing? I don't think we're performing in line with what the council's vision is, community's vision is. I see our neighbourhoods, as far as their cleanliness, it's below standard. As far as our compliance and regulation, below standard. As far as our park cleanliness is concerned, below standard. And as far as our DA and planning areas are concerned, they're obviously struggling. Now, there's a lot of reasons why all that's happening. And a lot of the reasons are because we're working to a budget that was developed by the administrator, which our hands are tied until we develop a new set of figures. So I can appreciate that. But the person in the street, they don't understand that. All they know is that we're in office and we're in control of everything out there that happens, and we're in control of everything out there that doesn't happen. And I think we ought to do ourselves a service and try and offset some of the responsibility here and point out the fact that the set of figures that were adopted are not really adequate to be able to address the needs of the community vision. And the most important aspect of this document is that here we are in November, and in February we're going to start developing the new budget. And I suppose we'll have workshops and all sorts of things around that. But how do you tell a department that you're not within 20 or 30% of where you should be, right? And how do we know what financial level of compensation we need to put into that department to bring it up to standard so that parks do get cleaned? That after a weekend they get cleaned on Monday, not on Tuesday or Wednesday. And there's some parks that haven't been cleaned in months, and I can tell you, go and see a park called Pine Reserve, Pine Park in Pine Street, Auburn. Go and have a look at St Joseph's, next to St Joseph's Hospital, the public domain, right next door to it. Rubbish that's been there for months, and in this park as well, and in other parks. You see, there's something basically wrong in this document, and it's the figures. I think there's a good work ethic by the officers of council to deliver according with the tools they've been given. But it's our responsibility to ensure that the tools we give our council staff in future are going to be adequate to address the community's vision for what they want their neighbourhoods to look like. So that's my concern when I read comments like Cumberland Council has performed to a high standard in this quarter. All of Council's 12 services operated to a high standard during the period. Well, they operated to a high standard according to the amount of money they had to spend. In other words, they spent their money according to the budget. But the community would argue that the high standards that they expect are not being maintained. So that's my point. I say that to the Chamber in all sincerity and to the organisation, that it's our challenge as we approach this next budgetary period to ensure that there's adequate resources given to our staff to do the job that we expect them to do.
Thank you, Councillor Garrard. I did have Councillor Christo, but I believe you've dropped off. Do you wish to address?
No, I was going to address the chamber on another matter, but I decided not to. My question was asked by one of my colleagues, but I do agree with Councillor Garrard. Only today I spoke to council management, and I acknowledge them for their prompt service. But down at Everly Park, there was no toilet paper facilities, and I get complaints that there's no toilet paper for these young athletes to use. I'm always inundated with the cleanliness of that ground or lack of it. Now, they are a group that uses, various groups use it there, but after cricket's played there on the weekend, there are water bottles left everywhere, shattered beer glasses as well. Where the council officers on the Wednesday, and it's still not cleaned up. So I completely agree with Councillor Garrard, and I think we do need to supply our council officers with a bigger budget and give them the adequate resources, because I think they're doing the best with what they're given. Okay, but it's not good enough, and I think there has been some creative writing, in the report. I look at it, and I'm no financial genius, but I just look at it, and to me it looks a bit misleading. What?
Thank you, Christo. I do have a motion moved. I believe it was Councillor Addy and seconded Councillor Grove. Is there any further? Yeah, about that. Is there any further discussion? No further discussion. Right of reply, Councillor Addy. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. Yes. Notices of motion 212. And if I can just get to the right section, notice of motion, Phillips Park, Lidcombe, and Councillor Zareka. Would you like to move this motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
And Councillor Addy, are you seconding it?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Zareka.
Thank you. I mean, this is a fairly, and I apologise for this. I think people are getting quite sick of my motions, but unfortunately, the only way to get things done, the only way to get things done these days is to make them legal. So, and the way to do that here is that application, in fact. So, given that, and I thank Councillor Addy for supporting me on this, one of the ladies, in fact, in his wards contacted me, probably because of all the advertising I'm doing, which I'm fairly much regretting at this point because... But I got the call and she said, look, I'll promise you 200 signatures on a petition. We really need these. We're getting really old. You know, the old machines are, they're not, oh, sorry, the stations are not working anymore and we need to replace them immediately. So I said, yeah, this is another subject for a motion, and that's what I've got right here.
Any further speakers? Yes. Councillor Campbell.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Well, and then Councillor Garrard, and then Councillor Hammond. Councillor Campbell.
I support the motion, Mr. Mayor, and I've had representations about this, and I've been working with council officers on it to some extent. But I was going to ask a question because it did come up in discussion with council officers about the funding. Is it necessary to put something in here about funding in order to get it done this financial year, or will it have to wait until the next financial year?
Mr. McNulty.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe it's something we could probably address in the second quarter review and provide the funding through that mechanism, and then to provide the work in the last quarter of the year.
Yeah, so there's no need to write anything specifically in here about it?
I guess that you could, about $120,000, I believe.
Right.
Mr. Mayor, councillors, the situation you've just adopted the quarterly adjustment, which shows with $300,000 ahead of budget. It's quite appropriate that Mr. McNulty prepares a cost of this work and comes back to you and then recommends that you use some of that surplus. It's likely that a similar amount of surplus will be again for next quarter. Again, for Councillor Garrard's point of view, that money could also be used to change service levels in the short term. So I think it's quite appropriate if this motion is adopted, Mr. McNulty will undertake the costing and bring a report back to you and say it can be costed out of the surplus from this quarter.
Okay, I'll leave it at that then.
Councillor Garrard.
Well, Mr. Mayor, that explanation, I hope the councillors were listening to that, because that's probably what the mover and the seconder should have been doing. This resolution, which tells the staff to go out there and do something. Install the park, install it. Where's the money coming from? There's no funding mechanism in the resolution. If you want something built, you ask for a report, you get a quote for it, and then you find out a source of funding. That's how you would do something at home, I think. You just don't go down the road and down to Bunnings and get a lawnmower and walk out the door with it without finding out how much it costs. And hey, well, maybe you do. No. I don't know. I don't know how some of these councillors, whether they mow their lawn at all. But at the end of the day, this is very important that we create, we adopt a policy. In a policy, it's an ethic that what the General Manager just said is most important. You must have a source of funding associated with every resolution. Otherwise, you know, it's just like, you know, I won't suggest that Holroyd was like country practice or whether Auburn was like home and away. But at the end of the day, we need to lift our standards, and I hope the councillors have taken it on board. This resolution should read much different to what it reads there, and it should be amended to make it legal. That there will be that we get a report regarding the costing of the playground equipment, and that report will then also have options for a funding mechanism.
Councillor Garrard has put up a good point, and even though it has been indicated by the officers, I probably would prefer if the mover and the seconder would agree that that it takes in for a report on where the financials are going to come from.
Yeah, with great respects, Mr. Mayor, I mean, we don't actually go out there and spend money willy-nilly. It's got to go through an expression of interest process, get pricing, come back to council. That's right. This is what it says. I mean, it doesn't mean, Mr. Mayor, go out there and put them in there tomorrow yourself. It means you actually go out yourself to put it in.
Like me going to Bunnings and buying a lawnmower, isn't it?
We'll go to Bunnings, get lawnmowers, and we'll go mow everyone's lawn.
But
But there is a process.
there is a process, and I believe a report to come back
So
to council would be
if council is in the
appropriate.
view that we must actually state things, like for argument's sake, Mr. Mayor, today we'd like to talk about this motion. Before we talk about this motion, we've got to flick through the pages, and then we've got to read item number 3, and then we've got to go and you've got a dot on the end of it, like Councillor Sims used to say, there's a dot missing from the report. I mean, there is a process here. Okay, go out there and install the items, but hang on a second. Council's policies are go out there, get pricing, find out who can do it, what the prices are, come back to council. Here are the prices. We don't actually have to tell you what to do. We've got these policies in place. But if Councillor Garrard would like us to actually spell it out word for word, seeing as just in case I miss something, we don't have a problem with that.
I'll take that as the suggestion.
Here. And I've got
Sorry, Councillor Garrard. Well, I'm trying to sort that matter out, Councillor Garrard. Thank you.
The motion isn't prepared to do so. I'd like to move an amendment along the lines that you're suggesting.
I have an issue with it.
I believe that both the mover and the seconder are willing to make the adjustments.
Number 1, please go out there and find someone with price. 2, please go out there and get expression of interest. 2, 3, please go.
There's no need for personal reflections, Councillor Garrard. Let's work through the paper. We've got a Gowrie here that's being very patient. I think we should be just as patient.
That council provide a report. It's on the screen. With respect of funding for the Parks on Stage and Phil's Park. Fine.
Fine. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Grove.
It's and it's just about how we go forward. Look, you know, if we want to put, what do they call it, exercise equipment into a park, it's not something I get too worked up over one way or the other. I do note that the former Parramatta Council had a something of a ward-based process for capital works, or at least some sort of a, look, I don't know the details of it. I know the former Holroyd Council had a ward-based process, which is regarded in industry as not being best practice, and really it was so small it was not really worth arguing as to whether it was best practice or not. You know, it's like, you know, 3/4 of nothing is still not very much. So I think it would be worthwhile, and I know we're dealing with leadership in transition and transformation, looking at how we start dealing with ad hoc requests for capital works and minor capital works. Obviously, ward funds now unlawful, but I'm sure that there are many 21st century councils that have a smart process for dealing with this that doesn't necessarily go to a panel of 15 councillors where we've got all these parochial interests. And is certainly not as clunky as the grants program we currently have. But if we could get the SMT or whatever they're calling themselves to start looking into how we can get this done, potentially without needing to move a notice of motion each time, that might avoid some of this stuff. Just put that forward for a SMT follow-up.
I believe the officers will take that on board. Thank you, Councillor Grove. I've got Councillor Wong and then Councillor Hamid. Councillor Hamid.
Given we're asking for a report, propose that we ask for the same report on Granville Park. There was some exercise equipment put there recently, and quite frankly, I don't think it's enough. It's very, very small, so perhaps we can add that as a.
I'll take that. The officer will just evaluate that rather than it going on the motion.
Happy with that.
Jane's are tall, thin and beautiful, and as such it's not required at this stage. In my view,
All right, well, we've
Have we got any parks in Wentworthville or?
we've added it. I'm council, I'm mindful of the time, and I'm mindful of the time, and we have other serious business. It's all serious, but we have other very serious business to get through. So, is there any further discussion on this item? No? All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare it carried.
Next.
Council notice of motion, Campbell Hill Pioneer Reserve. Councillor Zarika, are you moving this
Yes.
notice of motion? Councillor Garrard, are you seconding this notice of motion?
All right then.
Thank you. Discussion.
We could either run it this way, either of two ways. I can put the motion, or I can talk on for about 5 minutes. I'll put the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Zarika. Is there any discussion? Councillor Garrard.
Mr Mayor, councillors, it's a good resolution. And the only thing I would like to add to it, and I had a word to Councillor Zareka earlier, if we can put another condition there, another clause that we attempt to seek regional sports and recreational funding for this project. Just very briefly, regional stuff, there's not a lot of money go out to regional sports and rec, but there are a few programs across New South Wales. This particular park is very much a regional park, and I think if we cooperate with the neighbouring council and their state members, perhaps we can get another source of revenue in to assist us here.
Mr Mayor, I've just noticed 1C, I'm missing a 1 in front of the 5. 150. There's no room on the road.
The road's it's a narrow road.
Is there any further discussion? Councillor Hamid and then Councillor Elmore.
I just want to add that we should look at potential toilet upgrades to the existing toilets. I was in there the other day and they're absolutely disgusting.
I'm sure with the installation and development of a water park that those facilities will be looking at major upgrades. Councillor Elmore.
I just want to make a point, Mr Mayor. Usually you read about these things in tomorrow's paper, but you don't have to worry about reading tomorrow's paper. You can read about it now. But I'm concerned. I know that Councillor Drake is very passionate about getting some work done and getting a move on. When he first arrived at council, I think he was a little bit frustrated about the speed of council's work. And you know, if you've been in council for a while, they don't move very quickly. But I'm a little bit concerned that that these sort of funding arrangements are sort of in the media more. I think we should really get together at council and discuss them more. And we should prioritise these projects more as a council rather than just putting notice of motions up.
I'll take that as a comment, Councillor Elmore. Thank you. Any further discussion? No further discussion. Right of reply, Councillor Zarika. No. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. Council, that in accordance with section 10A, 2A and clause 2B of the Local Government Act of 1993, council enter into closed sessions to discuss items 204/17, 183/17, 205/17, 197/17, 209/17, 210/17. Have I missed any? As these items relate to personal matters and commercially confidential information. For the members of the public and the press, this means you will need to leave the chamber temporarily. Once the items are addressed, the chamber will be reopened to the public, and the General Manager will note the resolutions which occur in closed session for the record. We will then deal with the remaining items on the agenda. Please note the live stream will also resume following the confidential sessions of Council for the large audience that may be watching. Well, if you, all right, I'll start. Thank you. Council, during closed council, the council considered item 204/17 for staff confidential matter, and consistent with the provisions of clause 5 of his contract of employment, Mr. Malcolm Ryan, council's interim general manager, has advised that he will not be seeking renewal of this contract. Mr. Ryan's contract was due to expire on the 30th of September 2018. I have considered this position and discussed it with Mr. Ryan in the interest of ensuring the best possible outcome and transition for the organisation and the community. Following these discussions, I recommended that Council resolve the following. Part A, 1, that the Mayor be delegated authority to negotiate and implement a suitable departure date for Mr. Ryan in accordance with the standard contract of employment for general managers of local councils in New South Wales. 2, that Mr. Hamish McNulty, Deputy General Manager, Environment and Infrastructure, be appointed as the Acting General Manager from the date of Mr. Ryan's departure until such time as a new General Manager is appointed, up to a maximum of 12 months, consistent with the requirements of Section 351 of the Local Government Act 1993. 3, in accordance with the Local Government Act 1993, Chapter 11, Part 1, S 333, the Acting General Manager is to commence a review of the staff structure using a suitable qualified consultant to assist with this review. 4, that a progress report on the review of the staff structure be reported to Council within 3 months of the review commencing, and that in accordance with the guidelines of Council's Human Resources Manager, Council is to appoint a suitably qualified consultant to commence the process of providing a final list of to Council of potential candidates for the role of General Manager no later than 3 months prior to the end of the Acting General Manager's term. 6, that the communication material is developed to notify staff and the community of the changes to the General Manager and the senior management positions. Part B, 1, that all work currently being undertaken, if any, on the former council chamber at Auburn cease. 2, that the Acting General Manager carry out a review of the Auburn building with a view to A, conducting council meetings, B, provide an office and facility for the Mayor, and C, provide offices, facilities and meeting rooms for the use by councillors, and 3, that the Acting General Manager investigate and provide a report on the feasibility of providing a room or rooms for the use by councillors for meetings and facilities in the Granville Town Hall. On behalf of the Council, I would like to thank Mr. Ryan for guiding Council and the community through the amalgamation process and for continuing to provide good service to all the community members of the new Cumberland Council. I so move this mayoral minute.
I hate to be rude, but I'm going to ask to move a matter of urgency. Matter of urgency is with respect to a public safety matter, and that's the reason for the urgency. You agree to urgency, Mr. Mayor? Mr. Mayor, I would move that Council review and update asbestos management planning and related procedures to ensure implementation of best practice in the protection of the public and staff in the handling and disposal of asbestos. I have that written and I'm happy to supply that.
Second, Councillor Zeta. Is there any discussion? No discussion. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. General Manager, if you could run through the list.
Mr Mayor and Councillors, Council Y in confidential session in item 18317, contractual conditions of senior staff, received and noted the report that's before them as displayed on the board. Item 205. Is the Wentworthville Leagues Club proposed licence. The Council resolved as displayed on the board, which is 1, placed on public exhibition Council's intention per Section 47 of the Local Government Act 1993 to enter into a 21-year licence with Wentworthville Leagues Club. 2, to authorise the General Manager or their delegate to execute the necessary documentation. And 3, objections are received, the further report will be forwarded to Council. In item 197, waste management contract. 29. This is an item in terms of waste management contract. The Council resolved to note the contents of the report. In items 209 of 17, tender evaluation report for Auburn Basketball Ruth Centre. Council resolved to accept the 10-day evaluation panel's recommendation to award the contract to P&D Bamford Enterprise Proprietary Limited, trading as Ladoran Group, for the provision of the Auburn Basketball Centre roof remediation project for an amount of $741,012, including $61,260 in provisional rate items, most advantages and best offer received. General Manager or his nominated delegate be authorised to execute the contract. In respect of items 210-17, Oriole Park remediation project, Council resolved to accept the 10-year evaluation panel's recommendation to award the contract to Enviro Pacific Services Proprietary Limited for the amount of $887,998.04 as the most advantage and best value offer received for the provision of Oriole Park remediation project. The General Manager or his nominated delegate be authorised to execute the contract in the associated documents. That ends the recommendations from Council in confidential session, Mr Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank the General Manager for his service to our community and local government more broadly. I can't imagine that it's easy being an interim General Manager following a merger, particularly putting together some, the diverse mixture that is the Cumberland Council area. And to wish you for all the very best for the future, and thank you for the strong foundation you've given us to build upon.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Further comments? Thank you.
I've got a check shirt on and Maxine's apparently.
Do you guys watch yourself?
I'll declare the meeting closed at 10:04. Thank you very much.
Hey, Charlie.